Josh Beatar for FTS MMA, and we're here down at the Combat Training Centre at Burleigh Heads, and I'm joined by none other than the Turkish delight Shannon Ross, who is fresh off of his UFC debut at UFC 284 in Perth, which we'll get to and much more. Just before we get to that, I want to give another quick shout out to Blackboard Varsity Lakes. If you're in Australia, if you're in Queensland more specifically, if you're on the Gold Coast, come and check them out. Obviously, they're a great cafe, good food and good service, like I've mentioned before. They're actually fueling today's interview. I've been there for a coffee this morning, so go and check them out. They're a great cafe, and yeah, please support them because they support us. So look, onto fighting things. Shannon, obviously, I know you made your UFC debut in Perth. Before we get into the fight itself and all that sort of stuff, you're a guy who's been through a lot of adversity. I'm going to touch on that as well. How was it just being able to be there for the week? How was the week itself, the walkout? That must have been an incredible moment, being in front of family, friends and everything else. How was the overall experience for you now, a month removed?
Yeah, the overall experience couldn't have gone better, really. The only thing that could have been better was the outcome of the fight, but sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles. Yep. Phenomenal fight week, phenomenal event, phenomenal getting to make that walk on my debut in Perth, Australia. 16,000 people backing me, supporting me. It was very surreal and something I'll hold very highly for the rest of my MMA career and life.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I know you touched on the camp was perfect. And for anyone that doesn't know, Shannon was working 40 hours a week prior to this fight. In previous camps prior to this fight. So you mentioned that this camp was perfect and everything was awesome to the lead up. Going into the fight itself, obviously he missed weight, and by a substantial amount. How much did the sort of weight miss bother you? And also in the fight itself, is there anything you think that maybe you could have done a little bit differently as you were, as the fight sort of started? Is there anything you look back on now and reflect and go, maybe I would have done this, maybe I would have done that? Or is it more of a case of, it's happened, let's just move on, he won the night, that's it?
Yeah, there's a bit of both, right? I try not to dwell on the loss too much. Obviously, the fight didn't last too long, so we can't really get into the details and break it down and get into that. But I thought I started good. I was making him miss with the kicks and that sort of stuff. Obviously, that shitty little body kick that hit me on that weird angle winded me, and my body was on pause for 10 seconds, and 5 seconds after, I'm perfectly fine. But yeah, perfect fight camp, perfect lead up to the fight. So for me, it was a shame the fight played out the way it did with such a good camp and a good lead up and feeling so good. Obviously going through other camps and having such bad camps and the appendicitis and then putting on such good performances. It's just crazy how things play out, and this is the fight game, and I think that's why it's the biggest, fastest growing sport, and that's why people love it so much.
100%. Well, look, like we touched on, adversity should be your middle name. You're no stranger to adversity. You've been through adversity your whole life. Come over, so many leaps and bounds and obstacles throughout your career and your life. As you look at this fight and what it meant to you to debut and to not get the win, but like we mentioned this morning, it wasn't a 3-round war. It was a quick fight, but you come out relatively unscathed. No real bad bruises, no cuts, nothing like that. So how do you overcome this adversity and take the motivation from that fight into your next fight?
Yeah, I think obviously I come out super fresh, not a mark on me, not a scratch on me. 10 seconds after I was perfectly healthy and fine. Obviously it's just straight back to the drawing board, see when we can get the next matchup, work towards that, try to fix a few little things that we can take from that fight. Obviously the weight miss and all that stuff, I don't think it plays a big factor, but it's more a mental thing, thinking about that. But yeah, I felt great, I felt good, no excuses on my end. I felt super awesome, and now it's back to the drawing board. I've been training straight away since the fight. I didn't really take any time off, or I didn't think I deserved any time off, so I'm straight back into it. Looking to get matched up as soon as I can and go from there.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, is the time frame for the return. I know you're dealing with a slight injury, but the time frame for that is not too long. So in your ideal mind, is there a date, is there a month that you look at for the rest of this year and go, that's what I'm aiming towards. That's what I'm working towards.
Yep.
And has there sort of been any early contacts with the UFC in terms of an opponent or who you'd like, which date you'd ideally like to come back on?
Yeah, so no talks on opponents yet. We've got a few sort of a little time frame set in place with my manager Denny Rubenstein. He said sort of June, July. Mm-hmm. This little bit of an injury I'm carrying just from last week, so maybe July, August we'll be looking at being back in there. That gives me obviously a good camp, good preparation. My weight's good, I'm still sharp. Fix this little niggle up, and yeah, look to get straight back in there. Opponents, no one on the top of my mind at the moment, but obviously there's fights nearly every weekend in the UFC, so we'll see some flyweights that make themselves available. And obviously for me, I want to fight on big events.
Yeah.
Started my debut out on 284 pay-per-view in Perth. I feel like that sort of set the standard. Now I want to fight internationally if I can. Fight week would be amazing. International fight week, that's a massive thing. If you're fighting in the UFC, that should be a goal for you. So yeah, I'm looking towards that or around that time. So let's see what they come back with and go from there.
Well, let's talk about International Fight Week, because there's been rumours of Alexander Volkanovski, potentially fighting Yair Rodriguez at UFC 290, I believe it is, International Fight Week. If you're a part of that card, that'd be two consecutive fights underneath Alexander Volkanovski. And I know you did some training at Freestyle, which we'll get into in a second. But what was it like being a guy that's trained with Alex to then see the performance he put on against Islam Makhachev, which was, I think for all Australian MMA fans, it was an outstanding, incredible performance, which not a lot of people gave him enough credit for leading into that fight, that he would be able to potentially win that fight.
Yep.
So what was it like being able to sit there after your fight and watch him do his thing and really prove a lot of people wrong in that fight?
Yeah, 100%. For me, it wasn't surprising. Obviously, spending time with Alex in the training room and just seeing how good he is and how cerebral he is and how smart he is. I think the fight played out exactly. I was not surprised at all. I knew he would get up. I knew he would dictate positions. I knew he would put the pressure on. And obviously, very arguable that he won that fight. So I actually said it a few times. I think Alex will win by decision. Obviously, very close, going split, going whatever it ended up being. A lot of people have different opinions, but I think his stocks rose from that, right? I think people see how good he is, upper weight class, taking on Makhachev. He fought phenomenally. And for me to look at that and see him, how he trains, sort of gives me that little bit of confidence in knowing I can sort of get to that area as well.
100%. Well, you did some training at Windang at Freestyle MMA for about 5 or 6 weeks, I believe. Last time we spoke to you was actually the second day you got there.
Yep.
So is that sort of something you'll be looking to sort of implement in your next camp, is sort of heading down there for a little 5-6 weeks stint, then come back and finish your training at Combat, or is that sort of just a one-off sort of thing?
No, I absolutely loved it. I would have loved to get back down there to finish my whole camp. Yeah. Just the way things worked out with obviously family commitments, school holidays, all that sort of stuff. In the lead up to the fight, I wanted to be around my kids while they're on school holidays and give them a bit of dad time while I'm not training, and make myself available for my wife and that sort of thing as well. It's obviously I've got a lot of commitments outside of fighting itself, so I try to prioritise what comes first and most, and that's my family. Yeah. So, and one of my biggest goals is to be a great dad. So obviously school holidays, the kids are at home. Why would I not want to spend time with my kids and hang out and have fun? And obviously training and all that is getting done, and I'm putting myself through what I need to do. But those extra hours, I love to be with my family, be with my kids, be with my wife, and go from there. So maybe next time we get down to Wingdang, I've got some very good family friends down there that let me stay with them. So get back down there, do 4 or 5 weeks, maybe do the whole camp. But yeah, definitely I would love to get back down and train with the guys again. I loved it when I was there, and the coaching and the energy in the room is phenomenal. So yeah, definitely would love to get back down.
Well, a couple of last things from me. I don't want to take too much of your time, but Australian MMA, I think in the last year and a half, and I think a lot of people would agree, has been on a rocket ship. It's been on a massive rise. It's become more publicised, more in media. when you look at shows like we're talking about this morning, like Beatdown Promotions run by Damien Brown, Eternal, which is on tonight, Eternal 74, what is it like for a guy that come 13 years ago, starting in 2010 when MMA was very much a taboo sport, wasn't a sport that people thought of as a sport, it was more barbaric and everything else.
Yep.
What is it like for you to see guys get their kits, for Eternal and stuff like that? It must be pretty mind-blowing, but how excited are you for guys, heading into the sort of new age and new realm of Australian MMA?
Yeah, look, it's massive. The platform the guys have that are coming up on the regional circuit now is phenomenal. Obviously Beatdown, obviously Eternal, who's at the pinnacle of the Australian MMA scene at the moment. Getting to see what these fighters get these days on the stage, they rock up, they get a gear bag, they get all their stuff, they get a supplement bag, they get all this stuff for rehydrating. When I fought, it was like, come in, weigh in, piss off, come in, fight, see you later. Yeah. So there was none of that stuff. And like every time the UFC comes back to Australia, it just lifts the regional, the local scene, and it's just making the sport bigger and better. And obviously guys like Damien, he's been through the UFC, he's been risen. He gets to see how the shows, the production, everything works, right, on the big stage. So he's bringing that now into the local scene. Same as what Eternal's doing. They have this awesome platform, obviously Fight Pass. Yeah. You might have 3 or 4 fights in Eternal and you've been viewed by 10 million people, right? When I had 15 fights before I got viewed by 1 million. So it's a big thing now. But for the fighters coming up, it's massive, it's awesome. The sport's rapidly growing and it's starting to filter down into that local promotions, and it's good, it's great.
Last thing from me, Shannon, we're obviously at the Combat Training Centre. It's a pretty prestigious gym here on the Gold Coast and, dare I say, Australia. Obviously there's a few guys tonight fighting at Eternal 74. This interview will probably come out after that event's finished, but what sort of guys do you think the MMA community in Australia should be on the lookout for that are coming through this system at Combat?
Yeah, obviously look out for anyone from this gym first off and foremost. We have great coaching here. We have great athletes here. Everyone is very well rounded. And then the next thing outside of that is like how they hold themselves, how they promote themselves. I think that's a very big thing in the fight scene itself today. Like sometimes fighting is just not enough. Yeah. So sometimes you need to be the fighter, be the showman, be the whatever you want to call it. But that's how you build your fan base, build your whatever your brand, and that's how you move forward into get into the top, the pinnacle level of the UFC or wherever you want to go. If you're a fighter, hopefully that is your goal, is to be at the biggest, best, prestigious promotion in the world. But it comes with a lot of different things. Fighting is not just the sole part of it. You have to hold yourself accountable in and outside the cage. Obviously fight and perform good, put on shows, because that's how you get that sort of fast rise. And yeah, if you're an exciting young fighter and that's what your goal is, work hard and I'm sure you'll get there.
100%. Shannon, look, man, for me, you've become I've been a fan of you, but after this morning's chat and the coffee, I think you've become a friend of mine, and I appreciate you so much for your time. Sincerely, I really do. I look forward to your next fight. Anything else you want to say to the guys that are supporting you on this journey?
Yeah, just obviously thank you to my team, my sponsors, my wife, my kids. Obviously, what I do is a very hard and a time-consuming part of life, and you sort of sacrifice a lot I sacrifice a lot for what I do. So without all those people backing me and supporting me, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. My teammates who put the work in with me every day, like they say, yeah, you fight by yourself, but it's a whole team, it's a whole group of people that get you there. And without them, I wouldn't be where I am. So thank you to them. Obviously, my sponsors are massive. The people that help me financially. It's a very hard sport, and now that I'm not working full time, it's a bit of a juggle. You got to be pretty smart, and without my sponsors and that financially backing me as well, to make it a lot harder. So, thank you to all those guys. They know who they are, and if you're a young and upcoming fighter, there's some great platforms out there at the moment. Some great promotions. I would think very smartly and wisely where you put yourself, and use those promotions and use them to help build you up. And obviously without the good promotions, you don't get to the top. So thank you to the awesome promotions I've been a part of my whole career, and yeah, thank you to everyone else, the fans.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in for this another sit-down interview. Hope to do more in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, Shannon Ross, the Turkish Delight. This will be out sometime next week. So thank you so much for your time, guys. Catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Joshie. Cheers, brother.